pure and simple.
And that was Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor this afternoon, criticizing Democratic response to allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. Judge Brett Kavanaugh refusing to back down, describing new allegations against him as a ploy to block his confirmation to the High Court.
He says he won't be intimidated into withdrawing. Instead, in a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman and ranking member, he wrote, quote, "These are smears, pure and simple, and they debase our public discourse. But they are also a threat to any man or woman who wishes to serve our country. Such grotesque and obvious character assassination, if allowed to succeed, will dissuade competent and good people of all political persuasions from service."
And Amber Strong has more on the new allegations that led to Kavanaugh's letter.
Just as Senate Republicans were reaching a compromise with one woman accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, news of a second allegation. According to this report in The New Yorker, 53-year-old Deborah Ramirez says Kavanaugh exposed himself and caused her to touch his bare genitals when the two were freshmen at Yale. Ramirez says she was hesitant to come forward, saying she, Kavanaugh, and others at the party were heavily intoxicated at the time. But, quote, after 6 days of carefully assessing her memories and consulting with her attorney, she felt confident enough of her recollections. That has some critics raising questions. The New Yorker report highlights various people who Ramirez says were there when the incident happened. One person Ramirez says egged Kavanaugh on denies even remembering the party. Another male classmate Ramirez says was involved says he doesn't remember it. And others who knew Kavanaugh closely as a freshman also dispute her story. Still, others support her claims and her credibility. Kavanaugh flat out denies the incident, saying the allegations are a smear, plain and simple. The president strongly defended his nominee Monday, while also questioning the political process.
I think it could be, there's a chance that this could be one of the single most unfair, unjust things to happen to a candidate for anything. But I am with Judge Kavanaugh, and I look forward to a vote.
This comes just one day after Senate Republicans reached a tentative deal to have Kavanaugh's first accuser, Christine Ford, testify before the Senate Judiciary Thursday. Amber Strong, CBN News.
Well, Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has been following the story pretty closely. Abigail, in this letter released today, Judge Kavanaugh was standing pretty firm that he won't be pressured to withdraw his nomination. What else is he saying?
Well, it was a very strongly worded letter saying that he will not be intimidated. This will not force him to back out of the nomination. And he also said that the last-minute character assassination will not succeed. And he looks forward to answering questions on Thursday and getting an opportunity to defend his name. He also mentioned just he wants to defend his family. I talked to a White House source earlier today who said that his family has received death threats. There was a couple emails saying that they hope that Judge Kavanaugh and his wife actually die, references to putting a bullet in their head. So things are getting really, really ugly in this nomination process, and I think he's ready just to have a chance to speak to the Senate Judiciary Committee and give his side of the story.
Abby, I know Thursday is the day when we're supposed to hear from the original accuser, Dr. Ford, but Senator Dianne Feinstein is looking to push that back. Where do things stand right now?
Well, right now, the hearing on Thursday is very much still on. I know a lot of senators are eager. While Democrats have been calling for a delay because of new accusations, Republicans are eager to finally hear from Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, and we'll see about this new accuser. But right now, they're ready to move along this process and continue with that hearing on Thursday.
Well, with the new allegations out there, what's the atmosphere out on Capitol Hill like today?
Oh, it is crazy. Most of the senators aren't even back yet. They're just coming in this afternoon. But we've seen protests in Senator Jeff Flake's office, Ben Sass's office, just a floor below where I'm standing right now. There was a huge protest. And over in the Hart Senate office building where the hearings actually take place, there was a couple hundred people I saw being led by one of the leaders of the Women's March, Linda Sarsour, who were quietly led a walkout today for sexual abuse survivors that went to the Supreme Court. So there are protests everywhere, and I have a feeling these will only ramp up as we get closer to Thursday.
We see a case there of democracy in action. What about these, there are counter protests, I understand, that are actually coming in the form of prayers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I spoke with a lot of groups during the original hearing days that were in the hearing room and outside praying, and I actually ran into someone earlier today who said that she's organizing people to come pray on Thursday morning at 8:30 before the hearing to start praying around the Capitol buildings here and then also just pray throughout the day. So there are definitely a lot of Christians up here just praying that God's will be done in all of this.
Abigail Robertson, keeping on top of everything on Capitol Hill. Thanks for your time, Abby.
Thank you.
And Kari Savarino of the Judicial Crisis Network joins us now for more. Kari, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here.
What do you make of these newest allegations, Kari, against Judge Kavanaugh?
Yeah, I think what we saw here is Dr. Ford's initial allegations were falling apart before the Democrats' eyes. We had every single person finally who had been alleged to be at this party saying, no, I wasn't there. Her friend, a female, even said, I don't even know Brett Kavanaugh. I was never at a party with him. His calendars emerged showing that he was gone most of that summer and had no such party indicated. So I think Democrats were just looking for another smear. And this one came out really, the New Yorker's getting a lot of blowback, actually, from other media because groups like the New York Times looked at this story. This is a rumor that had been floating around. They investigated dozens of alleged witnesses or people who may have been there and could not find anyone who was an eyewitness and could corroborate it. Even the New Yorker itself acknowledges that Deborah Ramirez, the woman who came forward, she said initially when they talked to her, she actually couldn't confirm even that Kavanaugh was involved. It took her 6 days of thinking and consulting with her attorney, whatever that means, to bolster her memory and decide, yeah, maybe she does remember Kavanaugh being there. And yet everyone she indicated was a potential eyewitness has said no, they weren't this party. They do not agree with her description of. They say Brett Kavanaugh wasn't there. This is not something that they're familiar with. So this isn't even just that they're having trouble corroborating the story. This is actually having discredited it already in the story as it's coming out in the New Yorker. It's a real problem.
Senator Dianne Feinstein is calling for the hearing on Thursday to be postponed. Kari, do you think this process should slow down and an FBI investigation take place?
Look, this is something they've been calling for since Judge Kavanaugh was nominated and even before. Every single thing that happens, they're going to call for a delay. This is an allegation that does not even rise to the level of something that deserves to be thoroughly vetted. But look, the Senate Judiciary Committee, for their part, has been investigating all of these claims, even the ones that are far-fetched or very loosely sourced, like this one, and they've reached out to her. So they certainly are going to attempt to take testimony, and that's something that Senator Feinstein herself, as a member of the committee, is welcome to participate in. What we've seen so far, however, is that Senate Democrats, they're happy to go to rallies, they're happy to go on the press and say, we need to have more investigation being done. But when it comes to actually doing the investigation, which is what the Senate Judiciary Committee has been doing for the last week, taking testimony that's under penalty of felony, they're not interested. So they have simply been not showing up for those. And that's discouraging because if they want to have an investigation, their opportunity is there. I think it's more politically advantageous for them to just ignore that and then continue to try to make calls for someone else to do the investigation. They're trying to shirk their own responsibility.
Kavanaugh, he has a history of being really a champion for women, Kari. How do you balance that when it comes to these very serious allegations?
Well, I think that's one of the many reasons these allegations are not credible. We had a rally last week that I believe there were 80-some women who have known him and worked with him through every phase of his life, from women who dated him in high school to women who worked with him in the White House, people who went to law school with him, people who clerked for him, women colleagues he has today, who attest to the fact that Judge Kavanaugh is someone who has always stood for women, backed them, supported them, and been always respectful, gentlemanly, and decent toward them, as they would say. So this just simply doesn't add up with all of the testimony of the kind of person Judge Kavanaugh is. And we're seeing increasingly that even these own stories don't internally add up because the people alleged to have been there say it didn't happen.
Yeah. In light of everything that's happened, all of these allegations that have come forward, in your opinion, Kari, do you think Brett Kavanaugh is still the right person to sit on the Supreme Court?
Absolutely. We're certainly seeing some horrific bullying effectively from the left and a smear campaign being mounted. But that doesn't change the fact that Brett Kavanaugh is one of the most qualified nominees ever to be appointed and nominated to the Supreme Court. And people from the left and the right have acknowledged in terms of his judicial qualifications, he is outstanding. Even the left-leaning American Bar Association said not only did they give him the highest qualification for his legal skills, but they said in terms of integrity, he's someone who is not an A+, an A++. So yes, we have these last-minute allegations, but given the partisan nature in which they've been revealed, given all of the contrary evidence, including evidence from alleged eyewitnesses, I simply don't think that it seems that Brett Kavanaugh had anything to do with them.
Kari Savarino, thank you so much for your time. Great to have you.
Great to be here.
Well, is he in or is he out? That's what many are asking about Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein earlier today. White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has more on what's behind the questions. Ben?
Well, John, what a day. But in the end, Rod Rosenstein is still the #2 at the Justice Department. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders released this statement. At the request of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, he and President Trump had an extended conversation to discuss the recent news stories. Because the president is at the United Nations General Assembly and has a full schedule with leaders from around the world, they will meet, but not until Thursday, when the president returns to Washington, D.C. Now, this move comes after reports Rosenstein suggested to now former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe to wear a wire when meeting with the commander-in-chief, and even talked about using the 25th Amendment to remove Trump as unfit for office. Rosenstein has denied those reports. Senator Lindsey Graham and House Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes have cautioned against firing Rosenstein for now. They say the president should not fire him unless he believes he is lying. Trump did speak with his outside network of advisors, and we are hearing that most have reportedly been in favor of, again, not firing Rosenstein. So the fate of the Deputy Attorney General is still uncertain. We'll have to wait and see what comes out of that meeting later on in this week. Now, President Trump did speak a short time ago saying, yes, he did talk with Rod today, and we'll see what happens. So we'll keep you posted from the North Lawn. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Well, joining us now is CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, it was a little bit of a suspenseful day. Earlier, much of Washington suspected that this was Rod Rosenstein's last day, that he was out. Not quite the case. Maybe they're jumping the gun. What all's taking place?
This is bizarre. I mean, you know, to quote the Bengals, just another manic Monday. Wish it was Sunday. No,
you should sing that.
I shouldn't sing. Well, or no, I won't. Look, here's the deal. He was expected to get he was expecting to get fired today at the White House by John Kelly. That's what my sources tell me, and it didn't happen. And so Washington went crazy and like, wait a minute, but they thought he was going to get fired. Well, Trump wasn't even at the White House. So, I mean, the fact, though John Kelly could fire him if he wanted to right then, if he had Trump's approval. So, anyhow, it was just mass confusion. Look, I think what was going on here is that Rosenstein had offered to resign, not necessarily the way it was portrayed, which is has resigned. That's the key word, has resigned. He never officially resigned. And so it was all muddied today. It was a bit crazy.
Semantics.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth. David, if he is relieved, if Rod Rosenstein is relieved on Thursday, let's talk about the political fallout here. What does this mean for the Department of Justice and, in particular, the Mueller probe?
It's a big deal either way, because here's the deal. There's two avenues here. If he resigns, then Trump can use the Federal Reform Vacancies Act. And what that means is that Donald Trump can appoint anybody to replace Rod Rosenstein. When I say anybody, let me just be clear, anybody that's confirmed by the Senate. So that's what happens if Rod Rosenstein resigns. Now, if he is fired, that's different. Then Noel Francisco takes over. He's the next one in line. And he, by the way, has had a beef with James Comey for a while. Wow. He's actually a guy that's been very critical of the FBI. So Trump may win there, and
he's big on executive power as well.
He is, exactly, and so those are the two lines of what could happen here. Either way, it seems like a win for Trump, whether Rosenstein resigns or is fired. The only way this is not good for Trump is that if he actually fires Rosenstein, because the political optics there would be a problem for sure.
David, does this give President Trump some leverage, if you will, in this whole back and forth with Rosenstein and the Mueller probe, and he calls it a witch hunt.
Yeah, I think he has leverage to a degree, but I think the White House aides would never call it leverage for sure, because you don't want to have any sort of sense that he has leverage, because if he does, then it will look like he's playing politics with all of it. So I think they'll downplay that word, but I think he does to a degree. I just think we have to wait to see how it plays out. It's hard.
David, switching gears a little bit, you heard Abby talk a little bit about the Kavanaugh hearing, him pushing back pretty forcefully in that letter. What do you make of that letter? What was the impetus behind it? And what are you expecting at Thursday's hearing?
Well, first of all, I guess there's going to be a hearing Thursday. I'll be honest with you, at this point, we really don't know. I mean, at this point, I guess there will be a hearing, but there's so many twists and turns coming. This letter was extraordinary. I mean, it made Clarence Thomas's high-tech lynching comment, kind of just paled in comparison. I mean, one of the things in the letter that was interesting, I have it right here, and I have to put on my glasses to read it, but the word coordinated, he calls it a coordinated effort to basically to destroy him. I mean, that to me suggests, not even suggests, saying, look, politics are being played, and the fact that Brett Kavanaugh, of all people, he's supposed to stay away from the political angle of all of this, is saying it's a coordinated effort. By who? Democrats. So basically, those are huge, real tough words from Brett Kavanaugh for sure.
David, we only have about 30 seconds left. I really quickly want to ask about the timing of the Rosenstein meeting with the White House on Thursday that coincides with the Kavanaugh potential hearing. Any coordination there suspected?
There's always going to be talk of that, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Donald Trump loves to have the media chase the squirrel over there in the corner. So
over where?
I think it's right over there to the left of camera one. But look, yeah, so was there some of that? Sure, absolutely. And you know what? Guess what? Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, and George W. Bush, they all do it. It's called politics, and Trump's really the best at having them chase that squirrel. And it is over there. It's camera one.
It is over there.
David Brody, thank you very much.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
Coming up, why one pastor is trading in the pulpit to preach to those in the highest seats, power at the United Nations. Well, welcome back. The United Nations General Assembly is taking place this week in New York City. World leaders are gathering there to discuss everything from North Korea's nuclear program to Middle East peace. Today, President Trump hosted an event discussing the global drug crisis, and although critical of the United Nations in the past, calling the organization a waste of time and money, today the president affirmed the work of the United Nations.
I've always said the United Nations has tremendous potential, and that potential is being met. Slowly but surely, it's being met.
On Tuesday, world leaders will hear firsthand from President Trump when he addresses the full UN General Assembly. He'll also lead a session with the UN Security Council on Wednesday.
Iran is vowing revenge on the United States. The head of the Revolutionary Guard blames the U.S. for a deadly attack on an Iranian military parade this weekend. 25 people were killed in the attack, around 60 wounded. Arab separatists have claimed responsibility. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley told CNN Iran should not be blaming America.
He needs to look at his own home base. He's got the Iranian people are protesting. Every ounce of money that goes into Iran goes to his military. He has oppressed his people for a long time, and he needs to look at his own base to figure out where that's coming from. I think the Iranian people have had enough, and that's where all of this is coming from. But having said that, he can blame us all he wants. The thing he's got to do is look in the mirror.
CBN News senior international correspondent George Thomas joins us now for more on this. George, great to have you.
Thank you.
George, are you surprised by Iran's threats of retribution against the United States and Israel?
No, really. I mean, for the last 40 years, Jenna, they've been accusing the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, other countries of its various economic, political woes. I remember attending Friday prayers in downtown Tehran several years ago at Tehran University, and that chant, that mantra that we've heard for 40 years, almost every week: death to America, death to Israel. This this government has used that mantra and created sort of the great Satan, the United States, the great Satan, Israel being the little Satan. They've repeated this mantra for such a long time, and it's no surprise that they look to the United States and Israel and blaming them for this attack.
George, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is in the headlines for making some bold statements on the same day that attack happened. What did he say, and how is the White House responding to those comments?
In fact, Mr. Giuliani was speaking to members and supporters of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. It's one of the biggest opposition groups against the Islamic regime. And Mr. Giuliani said the following. He said, "I don't know when we're going to overthrow them," in reference to the regime. "It could be in a few days, months, or a couple of years, but it's going to happen. They are going to be overthrown. The people of Iran obviously have had enough." This morning, the State Department, Ambassador Nikki Haley, pushed back, saying that Mr. Giuliani's comments do not reflect the official position of the White House. But clearly, this is a regime that is under tremendous pressure.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, George. Just the pressure politically and economically this regime is under.
Absolutely. Actually, November 4th, the second set of sanctions are going to take effect. It's going to go after the oil industry, which is basically the economic engine for Iran. They are under tremendous pressure. I mean, in the last 12 months, we have seen sporadic demonstrations across the country, nothing similar to what we saw during the Green Revolution several years ago. But clearly, the economic and the political pressures that they're facing is enormous. The rial, the Iranian currency, has plummeted, and people are truly suffering, trying desperately to make ends meet.
George, real quickly, all this political uncertainty is happening in a country that's also experiencing an explosion of Christianity, as you and I have talked about many times in the past, right?
That's right. That's sort of the untold story in the mainstream media. But folks here at CBN News, they know we have been covering it for several years. Today, Christianity is growing the fastest in Iran, which is so surprising to many of our viewers. But that is the truth. That's what's happening. And it is putting, people are getting the sense of what do we do? How can we find answers to the political challenges, the economic challenges? And thousands upon thousands of Muslims, of Iranians, are saying no to Islam and are embracing Christianity.
George Thomas, thank you as always.
You're welcome.
The latest on the case of an American pastor imprisoned in Iran.
Well, Turkish leaders are hinting American pastor Andrew Brunson could be released next month at his upcoming hearing, Jenna. That is if and only if the U.S. stops putting pressure on the country.
Yeah, Brunson is currently under house arrest after spending almost 2 years in a Turkish prison, accused of crimes related to his Christian faith. His daughter spoke at the Values Voters Summit in Washington and says it's been difficult for her dad and, of course, their family.
I'll say there are times when I'm not necessarily happy with God's plan in this situation, but I've really come to realize that God is in complete control and He has a plan, and this is all for His glory. He is worth everything that my family has gone through, and I've seen that message coming through in letters from my dad as well, as he has started to transform and really submit to God and say, God, my life is yours. Whatever you do with me, let it honor you, let it declare your name and your goodness to people. And I am
Pastor Brunson's next hearing is scheduled for October 12th, and what a brave young woman. And of course, we've all been praying for Pastor Brunson and his family.
This whole country, yeah. We'll see what happens October 12th and pray and hope for the best. All right, that does it for us.
See you again tomorrow.